We are live. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story, once a week. I'm Anais.
I am Gerald.
And I'm Rami.
And this week we're reading An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Bierce. If you haven't read the story, you really should. It's not very long and a link is provided in the show notes. Read it and then come back. Spoilers ahead. In the story, Peyton Farquhar, a civilian and plantation owner, is being prepared for execution by hanging from an Alabama railroad bridge during the American Civil War. In a flashback, Farquhar and his wife are relaxing at home when a soldier rides up to the gate. Farquhar, a supporter of the Confederacy, learns from him that Union troops have seized the Owl Creek Bridge and repaired it. The soldier suggests that if someone were to burn down the bridge, that could be helpful. After the soldier leaves, readers discover that the soldier is actually a disguised Union scout who has lured Farquhar into a trap, as any civilian caught interfering with the railroads will be hanged. When the soldiers at the bridge tip the plank out from under Farquhar's feet, the rope around his neck breaks and he plummets into the stream below. He swims downstream as the soldier shoots bullets and cannonballs overhead. He leaves the creek and begins a 30-mile journey home through the forest, hallucinating later that same evening. The next morning, after having apparently fallen asleep while walking, he finds himself at the gate to his plantation. He rushes to embrace his wife. Before he can do so, he feels a heavy blow upon the back of his neck. There is a loud noise and a flash of white, and then all is darkness and silence. It is revealed that Farquhar never escaped at all. He died hanging from the bridge.
Good summary.
All right.
Good summary.
So, what did you guys make of this story overall?
Overall, I couldn't believe this was written in 1890. It felt so contemporary. The writing felt so contemporary. But I didn't like the sort of dream sequence falling into the river swimming thing, and then oh no, he's hanged after all. And to me that's a bit like the stories where something really exciting happens and oh, you woke up and it's all a dream. So it's this, I don't. It sort of misdirects the reader, and I don't really like that. But it's a well-written story and easy to read.
Mm-hmm. Robbie, you had a lot of facial expressions reacting as Gerald was speaking.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to what Gerald was saying. I think for this story, it's one of the stories where I haven't already formulated a rating, or at least nailed one down. So I think it's gonna be largely determined by the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. I haven't sort of thought about a rating, to be honest. I don't know. I don't really know where I stand on this, but I've got a figure, and we'll move one way or the other from that. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say that I think I'm the complete reverse of because I actually. So you said you thought it was well written. I didn't like the writing style. I found it a bit tedious. The description after a while, I'm like, I get it. It's the agonies, right? Like after a while, I just couldn't. It felt a little purple prosy to me, which is always like a big no-no thing to say. But but I love the time dilation. I loved that whole, that this whole thing happens that from his perspective takes a day, over a day and an evening, and then you realize it was just that final hallucination as the brain's being deprived of oxygen and he dies, right? Like, I just thought that was really cool. And like you said, it felt really modern. I think the reason it felt modern is because this is the precursor to a lot of stories that do that whole where the narration's happening at a different time scale than the rest of the characters or anyone else is experiencing it, right? So I liked it. So let's dive into, you said that you didn't like it because it's sort of like it was all a dream. None of that was real. So why does that bother you?
Because the writer is deliberately misleading the reader, and in the same way as you get into a story and then somebody wakes up and it was all a dream, and I thought, oh great, he's going to escape, and I'm with him as he he swims through the river and gets and gets fired at all, because there's such detail to that, and the type of shots that they're firing at him and all that stuff, and you're there with him, and then you realise no, he was hanged anyway, and you just think, oh, after all that, I was so that was disappointing, and a little bit about the writing style. Sometimes that I found right at the start the detail about how they carry their guns, and this means that, and that was a bit, there wasn't much point to that, and I found that a bit annoying, and I found that the mechanics of who was standing on which part of which piece of wood, I had to read that several times to work out who was doing what and how he was suspended and how he would drop. But apart from that, but yeah, I quite enjoyed the writing, and it's kind of strange that because I normally spot old writing just straight away, and when I read this, I had no idea it was written way back, and I thought, well, this must be written 50s at the earliest, 1950s, but 1890. Wow.
So, Rami, you say you haven't formulated an opinion, but what do you think the story is about? Did Rami freeze?
What do I think it's
there
about?
he is.
I didn't catch on to any larger meaning than it just seemed to be just for purely entertainment value. I didn't really identify any larger messages or motifs or anything.
What about you, Gerald?
Yeah, I didn't like Rami. I thought, well, it's an entertaining story, but then when because I realised, mea culpa, I didn't know anything about the American Civil War, I'm afraid. So I didn't know who was who and where they were. So I had to research that so I learned something about the American Civil War. But also I forgot. Oh, cracky, what was I saying? What was the question again?
And what's it about? So you started doing research.
Yeah. So I started doing research and found out that it's sort of quite typical of the writer, that it's sort of it's like a dark future. Everything is sort of futile. There's no point because everyone's going to die anyway. It's a bit like that, which surprised me because it didn't come across like that, and I can't really see where people think that is what it's about.
But I think actually. So you were saying that this is very typical of the author. So he's a veteran of the Civil War, and he has a very bleak view on war. And I think the very thing you don't like is the whole reason why people have this reading of it. So it's like, what if this story was about a guy who went to go burn down the bridge, do something heroic for the Confederacy, escaped with his life? Oh my God. And it ends there. There is then some kind of glory to war. There is something that you can do. It's not futile. But if it's one, no, your attempts were futile. You're dead now. And two, by the way, there's no glory in war and there's no glory in death. It's lights out, darkness. There's nothing for you in the afterlife. Bye-bye. Like that bleakness is, I think, the point, right? Because if everything were real, if it weren't a big hallucination of that a dying brain was having, then because there's that moment when the disguised Union soldier is in the house of Farquhar, and he's and there's that like narration about how Farquhar, he didn't join the army, but he still sort of like sees himself like a true patriot. He has like this romanticized view of war. If everything were to happen the way that it were written without the plot twist at the end, that romanticized view of war would be somewhat confirmed. Even if he failed, he is still in some way rewarded. He gets to escape with his life. It's a daring escape. He thwarted the Union a little bit, right? No, you rob Farquhar of that romanticization. You rob him of that glory, and you rob him of even glory in the afterlife. And that bleak cynicism of war, I think, is the whole point, and you need that plot twist at the end for it to happen. If he were to just die without having that hallucination happen, then you don't get the chance to make the point, right? There's no point. He got hung up. He failed.
I can see that, but also I think by constructing his escape with the breaking of the rope and so it all becomes logical and viable, and you think, oh yes, it could happen, and he's being shot at by the people on the bridge and people on the everything seems to make sense that it's it's perfectly feasible and possible. I think if he were to maybe have him standing on the plank but then thinking about his wife and his family, maybe thinking of not actually having him escape. I know what you're saying. You sort of it does twist it and says, yeah, if you get involved in this sort of stuff, you're going to die, and that's it. There's no glory. I see that, but I just think it's like a cheap trick played on the reader to get them, because you construct his escape and you show how it's possible he could escape. And for me, that's I just felt more disappointed at the twist in the end rather than enlightened or pleased by it.
Yeah, and I think he kind of did get a chance to experience that glory, but in his own mind.
But isn't that the point? It's only in your mind. It's not real.
Yeah.
It's all a fantasy.
Well, I mean, if you're dead either way, does it matter?
No, I think you can say that before you die, it's a useful thing that your brain does if you're someone of the opinion that this is what happens, right? But for those of us who are living and watch this, it's man gets hung on a bridge, right? We didn't live that fantasy.
I suppose. Yeah. I don't know. It just I think the writer could have shown this maybe by having him on the bridge and maybe keep coming back to the bridge. So have him thinking and reminiscing and dreaming. If I did escape, then I could swim, and and then bringing back to the bridge, and so you keep on grounding it in reality for the reader. Maybe it wouldn't have been as sharp a twist and as strong a twist, but for me as a reader, I think I'd rather that would have been more satisfying as a story, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of opinion then. But I wonder if also part of it is the distance that we have from war, the three of us. Because I was also reading like people who really, really like this, like other authors who were like, this is one of the best short stories of all time. It's one of the most anthologized short stories in American literature. And it had to also be veterans. It's like Vonnegut and stuff, where they're all like, wait a minute. So I think there's something about this story that resonates with veterans and soldiers. That it's a little bit like, maybe you're just so used to reading stories about soldiers escaping that all of a sudden when they don't, it just like brings you up short in a very visceral way that you're like, yeah, that could be me. And that identification might be what makes it so powerful. Like I said, the authors that I saw like quoting like Bierce is a genius. Not all of them, but many of them were also veterans.
Okay. That's quite interesting, yeah. And I can see people who had been to war and come back would then in retrospect be would see the relevance of this story and what the author was saying, and yet
connect to it in just a different way, because I would imagine when you're in that situation you do probably think about going back to your family and remembering various details of your life and even regardless of whether or not you were captured in war and being a prisoner of war. But I guess, yeah, it's almost like a reminiscing for them from when they were in battle and had similar thoughts. So could see that connection.
I suppose, and I think to be honest, I would have preferred to see the main character perhaps thinking about why he did this, and perhaps what a fool he'd been to be taken in by this random soldier who called at his farm and went to destroy this bridge, because that for me would have resonated more as a message about the futility of war, because we all, so many countries send their civilians or their armies, which are basically civilians, into a battle zone and into war on political grounds. So there's so many wars and so many people dying at the moment without any threat to the people of that country, and it's all happening in different countries far away. But then this was written in those times, so it's a moot point really to say how it could have been written with more resonance. So yeah.
That reminded me of something. So how did how did he know that the soldier that had stopped by his house and give him all these details was a Federal scout?
He didn't.
Farquhar did. You saying, how did I know as the reader?
No, how did Farquhar know? Because
he did it.
Well, because it says what. So is that just the narrator telling us that? Because there's a part right before part 3. It says, the lady had brought the water, and then an hour later, after nightfall, he repassed the plantation going northward in the direction for which he had come. He was a Federal scout. I thought that was Peyton observing him.
Oh, no.
Soldier
That's
doing
narration. Yeah.
Yes.
They didn't know. They assumed he was a Confederate because of the color of his uniform.
Okay.
I also wonder if part of the reason why the story resonated with people at the time is because there weren't that many stories that do this, where there's a subjective passage of time that happens in an instant. There was a few stories before, so when I did some research, there's that Charles Dickens essay called A Visit to Newgate, where a man dreams he escapes his death, and people think that was sort of like an inspiration for this story. But there's definitely a lot more stories after this was heavily anthologized that tend to play with this idea. We've seen it in movies like in Donnie Darko or in Fight Club, where everything happens in the guy's head, in Stay, and in a whole bunch of other stories as well, and novels. I'm trying to think of some. Brazil, Terry Gilliam does this. But anyway, basically, it just inspired this in a way that is still remarkable. Like, even if we now in 2018 looking back are like, Fight Club did it better, right?
Yeah.
But this was still one of the earliest examples of that, and one of the the one that popularized it. So that's also interesting. We've had that experience on this podcast before, where we go back and we see sort of like the grandfather to something that we've seen repeatedly over and over and over later, and we're like, we like the more modern ones. We like the ones closer to our culture. But yeah, it's still interesting to go back and see that early example.
And it is amazing. It's amazing that this story as a piece of writing stands up now in terms of literature. Because it's perfectly readable, and at no point did I think, oh, this is historical writing. Yeah, the bit about how they hold the guns and stuff, and was it perhaps a bit overdone, but basically it sort of moved. It had great pacing. It moved along, and it was really excellent writing.
Yeah. And you said something interesting earlier. I noted it in my head, but you said that the way that Farquhar survives in the hallucination is plausible. That is a way that someone could survive. And it's funny because you're right, that is a way that someone could survive, but there is like a less than 1% chance that's actually going to happen, right? So it's like, we're still grading this on the prism of in fiction. If we read this in a story where someone survived this way, we would say that's real. Like that's probable. That's not something that we would question and say breaks the rules of reality. But if we heard in real life somebody who was about to be hung and the rope broke, we'd be like, is God real? Like that's divine. Like that is so, you know what I'm saying? Like our rules for what is plausible in fiction is different than it is in real life. So it's funny that when you say, oh, it's plausible, it's like, yes, in fiction. Doesn't that go back to Ambrose Bierce's point that these ideas of heroism and escape and all of that in war, it's more fiction than truth?
Well, I would
Very good.
contest that assertion by saying that it is very plausible, because I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy, but there was a man who survived 3 attempts to hang him for murder and didn't die. And after the 3rd attempt, they just decided to let him go.
What's this story though? Is this one of those urban myths, or it was twice?
No, it's on Wikipedia. He's actually an Englishman.
I'm not saying this never happens. I'm saying when it does, you get your own Wikipedia page, right? That the common ideas of fantasy that people have about war, it's so rare. That's not how it plays out. When it does, you get a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, and it's the same with any type of storytelling, be it film or books or short stories or anything. I think the acid test that the reader or the viewer has to make is this action plausible? Never mind whether it's 1% or 90%.
Right.
Is it feasible?
Could it have happened? Yeah.
Could it have happened? And I keep using Die Hard as an example of storytelling, and you look at the whole of the Die Hard movie, and you think, oh, this is crazy, but it's just about plausible all the way through, just about plausible. And it's a fantastic adventure and romp and all this sort of stuff. So I think the rope breaking and because that maybe they've never done this before, maybe they don't know how to do it, and they did it wrong, and the rope wasn't big enough, and he broke, and it's plausible.
It is, and just real quick, make a point. And Ambrose Bierce would be like, "You're right. In a story, that would make for a great adventure. Too bad war is not fiction." That's what Bierce would say, right?
Yeah. I see what he's doing. It's and it's done very well, but it just, yeah.
You still want the story? Like, I came here for a story, though.
Because I had sympathy for the guy, and I had sympathy for he thought he was doing right, and he was sucked in by this scout who was in the wrong uniform in essence, and he was taken in by it, and he thought he was doing the right thing, even though he was a slave owner and all that sort of stuff. But we'll gloss over that. So I had some sympathy for him, and when he appeared to get away, I thought, yay, go him. But no, it's not to be.
What were you going to say, Rami?
Oh, just relating to the discussion about it being believable, I think the fact that it was set a while back also could have furthered the believability of it, that it was like shoddy, hanging equipment, and something broke and whatnot.
Yeah, they were out in the field, they were fighting a war and repairing the railroad, and maybe hanging wasn't the sort of thing they did every day, so they followed the rules, but maybe it had gone wrong, but who knows.
Yeah,
but they hung him, and he was dead. The end.
That's right. There's no glory in war.
There's no glory in war. There isn't.
No glory in war, no glory in death by Ambrose Bierce.
Yeah.
So do we have anything else to say about this story?
No. Nope. All my notes have been done.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's quite a short story, but it's a very readable story, and people, if people are listening to this, they should definitely go read it. It's interesting in what it's trying to do and what it says about war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So should we rate it?
I guess so. I'm going to give it a 4 because I liked the writing, the storytelling was good. I didn't like the twist, but that was but yeah, overall, yeah, pretty good.
Okay, Rami.
That's the rating I was going to give it 2.
Hey.
I will still give it a 4.
Boy rating.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm giving it a 5. I like the twist. Thank you very much.
Boo.
Okay, it's time to select next week's story. What are you guys submitting?
Well, I'm. It's been a while, not that long, but going back to Carve magazines, summer 2018. Enough for Me by Becca Crock.
Okay, Rami.
And the story I'm submitting is called The Signal Man by Charles Dickens.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, so while I was doing research for the story, I learned a few interesting things about Ambrose Bierce. I already mentioned he's a Civil War veteran, and he earned the nickname Bitter Bierce because of his mocking cynicism, or what we'd call today snark, really. So he essentially wrote a compendium of his cynicisms called the Devil's Dictionary. So I'm going to read to you a definition of a word, and you have to guess which word it's defining. I'm going to give you a choice of 3. We're going to give you the definition, and then what is the word? You're going to tell me the word. So I'll start with Gerald because he's first on my screen.
Okay.
So this is a noun that he defines as one skilled in circumvention of the law. Is that a politician, a lawyer, or a plantation owner?
A lawyer.
Yes, a lawyer.
Yay!
Okay, Rami, you look confused.
Good one.
Yeah, it's a really interesting quiz.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Rami, this is also a noun. They're all nouns. A statesman who is enamored with existing evils, as distinguished from the liberal who wishes to replace them with others. Other evils. Is that an anarchist, a libertarian, or a conservative?
Conservative?
Yep.
Wow.
I love the cynicism. A conservative, somebody who likes existing evils. A liberal wants new evils. It's just, he's very cynical. Okay, Gerald.
Yep.
A household consisting of a master, a mistress, and 2 slaves. Is that is that a marriage, a bachelor suite, or a brothel?
Master, mistress, and 2 slaves. It's got to be a marriage.
It's a marriage.
Yeah.
Wow. What year was this from?
Late 1800s, yeah, when he was active. This is...
Excellent.
Yeah. Rami. A permanent topic of conversation among persons whom it does not interest. Gardening, bird migration, weather.
Weather?
Yep, weather.
Yeah, I just said that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Still
Gerald.
true to this day.
Yeah, true.
This is a dead sinner revised and edited. Is that a saint, a prophet, or Jesus?
Oh, that's interesting.
A dead sinner revised and edited.
A sinner, a prophet, or Jesus?
A saint, a prophet, or Jesus?
A saint. I think that's Jesus.
It's a saint.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. Rami, for the win. If you don't get this one right, tiebreaker. All right.
Oh, no pressure.
No pressure. This is an elderly lady whom you do not happen to like. Is that a mother-in-law, a hag, or a spinster?
Oh, mother-in-law.
Nope, hag.
Oh.
An elderly lady whom you do not happen to like.
Oh,
all right.
No.
Tiebreaker is also interesting, so I'm glad we ended up here.
Okay.
So, all right. This is already crazy. How old was Ambrose Bierce when he traveled to Mexico to gain firsthand experience of the Mexican Revolutionary War? He disappeared the following year. Rumor was that he was killed by Pancho Villa. So how old was he when he went off to check out a war in Mexico?
Wow. Actually, I'm going to say 67.
Okay, Rami?
20.
20. No, okay. Gerald wins. He was 71.
Wow.
71 when he was like, I'm going to go to Mexico and check out the Revolutionary War firsthand. Died the following year.
Okay.
There was a clue.
I had the reverse idea that he went when he was like still really young and didn't really have the business.
There was a clue in how you asked the question. There was a hint that he went to Mexico. You know, how crazy.
Who does this? Who does this? Who just like is like, let me go check out this war at the ripe old age of 71.
Very good. Oh, can I just quote something from Ambrose Bierce? It is, I must just quote this. He's from Wikipedia. It said, Bierce detested bad readers who, lacking the habit of analysis, lack also the faculty of discrimination, and take whatever is put before them with the broad, blind catholicity of a slop-fed conscience of a parlour pig. Sorry, I just had to share that. I thought that was awesome. That should be our tagline on
Bitter Bierce.
Awesome.
Maybe said Bradbury speaking about bitter berries.
Yes. Excellent.
Okay. So, Gerald, what are we reading next week?
We are reading from Carve Mag Summer 2018, Enough for Me by Becca Crock.
Okay. But before you go, advance your literary battle line in our comments section at literaryroadhouse.com. Leave your thoughts on this story or join the Twitter opinion regimen at Roadhouse or the militia at our Facebook group for fans, the Literary Roadhouse readers. So see you there, literary soldiers. By the way, the final battle for literary cred and bragging rights takes place at the Literary Roadhouse Book Club, where we discuss full fiction novels. We're moving the publishing date. All right. Yeah. This month, we are reading Sing, Unburied Sing by Jessamine Ward. Also, if you believe hard work should be paid, join the union. Support our podcast efforts on patreon.com/literary roadhouse. Every bit helps. And as always, share this podcast with the Union soldier disguised as a Confederate at your door. Until next time, read a good story.
Fantastic.